Because I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
CRT is not an honest dialogue. It is a tactic that was used by Hitler and the Ku Klux Klan on slavery very many years ago to dumb down my ancestors so we could not think for ourselves.
I would urge white Americans to remove the claim, "I'm not racist," from our vocabulary.
Racism is baked into all the systems of American society, and that any sort of neutral system is in fact a guise for racial power.
It is a belief system that believes that racism that benefits white people is the foundational organizing principle of society.
Classic critical race theory is a law school course, and it's really, not taught as widely as I would hope it would.
As you can see from the title, not only do I believe that critical race theory's anti-racism is racist, but more importantly that it creates more racism. And this is the complete opposite of what they're trying to achieve, which is eliminating racism. For those who are unfamiliar with critical race theory, and just to avoid confusion, here is my understanding of critical race theory. It is a theory that attempts to understand the cause of persisting racial disparities in American systems, and it holds that the cause is white supremacy. Critical race theory was developed in the 70s and 80s to understand why the amount of momentum behind the civil rights movement didn't place minorities on the same playing field as other races. To their understanding, racism is baked and inherent in the American system, and this is why we see racial disparities in housing, healthcare, and education. And all of this may seem bright until you realize that they're actually abusing the words that they're using. To us, race is just what you look like, and racism is just treating that person differently based on what they look like. But to them, they have a different meaning for that. To them, race is a socio-political power construct created by white people to maintain the power of white people and oppress minorities. And the effects of this power construct is what we see daily in the racial disparities all throughout American institutions. So racism to them just doesn't mean calling somebody a racial slur. It actually means a large integration of policies and systems. In Ibram Kendi's X's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, he states, "Racism is a powerful collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequalities and are substantiated by racist ideas." Again, quoting from Kendi X, "A racist idea is any idea that suggests that one racial group is inferior or superior to another racial group in any way." And for Kendi X, the way to stop racism is to enforce anti-racism. Anti-racist ideas are any ideas that suggest that no race is superior or inferior to one another. And these ideas can be placed into politics, which can create a racially equitable society, even by the means of discrimination. Kendi explicitly in his book says the only way to fight racist discrimination is by anti-racist discrimination. But this is just simply more racism. Look, I'll show you how. In Kendi X's book, he lists off various ways in which people can be racist, and this includes biological, bodily, cultural, behavioral. But this is not the essence of racism. By going up to a random black guy and thinking that he's lazy, a Democrat, or likes certain foods, you are believing that his race has certain innate qualities based on his ancestral lineage. To quote Ayn Rand, "Racism is ascribing moral, social, or political significance to a person's genetic lineage." And this is exactly what's happening under anti-racism. To justify Kendi's X anti-racism, he quotes Harry Blackburn from a 1978 speech. "In order to get beyond racism, we must take account of race. And in order to treat some persons equally, we must treat them differently." Ayn Rand also elaborated on this by saying, "Colorblindness is held as an evil, that color should be made a primary consideration." I mean, this is as common sense as saying you can't put out a fire by placing more fire onto it. So to be an anti-racist, you must refer to the socio-political status of their race in comparison to other races. And this is exactly what we've been seeing with this whole entire idea of inclusivity being applied to the business or colleges and universities. This is stripping away a person's identity and replacing it with all the sins of their ancestors, which is just another form of collectivism. It's saying that you don't matter as an individual, you only matter in reference to your overall race that you belong to, which again is just more racism. You're making people feel unearned guilt about the actions of other people. And the same is true in reverse. You cannot have unearned pride for the actions of other people. Now, it's kind of simple to explain how anti-racism is racist, but what I really want to touch on is how it must necessarily create more racism. As sociologist Ann Wortham point out, the prerequisite to racism is ethno-race consciousness. And so for anti-racism to be creating more racism, they must be getting more people to reach ethno-race consciousness. Ethno-race consciousness is a type of psychological mindset that somebody has when they identify with their overall ethnicity or race, and they think and act in reference to their ethnicity and race. So how are people becoming ethno-race conscious? First things first, you destroy any sense of individuality. You completely stop anyone from reaching their self-identity. You tell them not to be too selfish, not to be too happy, and what is good is the good for other people. Instead of asking, what are you going to do in life that's going to make you happy, you ask, how are you going to be a productive member in society? And people are not learning this from their workplace or friends. It's even worse. They're learning this in their schooling system at the age of 5. And this all started with the philosopher John Dewey, who said, theoretical knowledge must be replaced by concrete practical action in form of class projects, which would develop the student's social spirit. The mere absorbing of facts and truths is so exclusively individual and affair that it tends very naturally to pass into selfishness. There is no obvious social motive for the acquirement of mere learning. There is no clear social gain and success thereat. John Dewey did not see schools as a place to learn and identify how to think, but much rather how to adjust to society. And the effects of this philosophy is everywhere. With this whole entire philosophy of social adjustment, you stunt a child's mental growth and you make it where he doesn't even trust himself to make decisions of his own. He will just continue to follow the group for guidance. To quote Ellsworth Toohey from Ayn Rand's fiction novel The Fountainhead, the soul is that which can't be ruled. It must be broken. Drive a wedge in it, get your fingers on it, and the man is yours. You won't need a whip. He'll bring it to you and ask to be whipped. What Toohey is saying is that if you destroy any individual values a person has, he will go to other people to fulfill that new hole. And for children, it's even worse because they never had the opportunity to develop their own values. They will just find their values by affiliating with other groups. And especially to a black person, the anti-racists want to racialize this group affiliation. You do this by saying white people created the system, they made it in a way where it's oppressing minorities and it's upholding whiteness. That white people did Jim Crow, white people did slavery, that white people supported slavery, that white people separated you from your African roots and your African culture. And since you're already focused on living your life by referencing the thoughts, actions, and values of other people, anti-racists love to suggest that white people are the improper guide since they destroyed blackness. And if you're black and you want to identify your true identity, then you would have to go to your African roots or your black culture, which is essentially respecting some type of culture because they share the same racial origin as you. In other words, it's replacing one's responsibility to identify themselves and letting external groups define their role in society. But not just any group or racial group. Again, to quote Ann Wortham, the race conscious emerges from a marginal situation and that his particular attitudinal and behavioral response to that situation is motivated by the psycho-intellectual policy of social metaphysics. By social metaphysics, Wortham means taking other people as a primary source of guidance. And by marginal situation, Wortham means that you are a cultural minority conflicting with the cultural majority, or that you're a statistical minority conflicting with a statistical majority. And by statistical minority and majority, what I mean is racial disparities, which may be caused by bad government policies, cultural aspects, or in today's world, both. Anti-racists believe this is a racial conflict because white people created the racial disparities and they have the power to eliminate the racial disparities, but they don't. And because of this external racial conflict, the ethno-race conscious person sees this as an internal conflict within themselves. The race conscious person wants to be accepted and included in the overall majority, but they want to stay true to their blackness. And this idea of blackness is reinforced by cultural norms. We can see this all the time. If you're black and you're acting in a certain way, they're going to call you an Uncle Tom, an Uncle Ruckus, you're acting white, or you're the white man's Negro, house Negro, like whatever. By referencing these two groups, you're having an internal conflict with yourself. And this is what Ibram Kendi X calls as dualing consciousness. And W.E.B. Du Bois calls this as dual consciousness. Now, how one handles their dual consciousness can lead to a variety of outcomes, but I want to focus on anti-racism. Because of their dual consciousness, they're willing to enforce their ethno-racial inclusivity in American institutions. And they're willing to discriminate against white people by, one, removing a white person so they're on the same status of a black person, or two, replacing a white person in a certain opportunity and inserting a black person. And of course, this is all done in the name of inclusivity. We have to do this to stop racism. But this whole entire policy of discriminating against white people is, again, based on race. It's punishing people for the actions of their ancestors. And it's inducing unearned guilt into white people. Not just any random unearned guilt, it's racial unearned guilt. The whole entire idea that their great-grandpappy owned slaves and thus you must be morally guilty for it is so insane. So when you continue this idea of discriminating against white people and continue the idea of anti-whiteness, white people become race conscious themselves. Not just race conscious, but race conscious of black people as well. And we can see this occurring with people like John Doyle and Nick Fuentes. This whole entire idea of white boy summer and celebrating whiteness, and look at what us white people have done. Remove the Native American savagery and we came here and built industry, government, individual rights. All of us white people did that, blah, 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 blah. And white culture, blah, blah, blah. We do have a culture and stuff like that. This is ethno-race consciousness. And you can tell this is ethno-race consciousness by analyzing their words. They're saying we white people and us white people have blah, 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 blah. They're essentially saying this racial group of white people is essentially one. And this goes back into the concept of unearned pride. If a white person does something good, then somehow I can partake in the celebration of that achievement and say, yeah, let's go white people, I'm so happy. Like, what? And the process of white people becoming ethno-race consciousness because of a lot of black people pushing the narrative of anti-racism and so on and so forth, they're going to discriminate back. And that's kind of the same wording that black Americans use too. They'll say, we overcame slavery and Jim Crow and we did this and we did the civil rights and blah, 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 blah. Again, that's ethno-race consciousness. And when white people become ethno-race consciousness of their whiteness and discriminate back, it's going to blow up this whole entire racial chaos. And the anti-racists are going to be like, look, I told you these white people are racist. But in fact, you made them racist. The only way to stop this racial war is stop implanting some type of magical value into your race. This whole entire idea of white pride and black pride has to stop. Your race is given to you by reality, and reality does not give race any type of value. It just is. And people still continue to put man-made values onto race that, if I'm black, then I'm this, and if I'm white, then that. Like, no, you're not. Stop. If you're black, then you're black. It doesn't give you real advantages over anything. You shouldn't be proud nor disgusted at your race because your race contributes this much to your self-identity. What does contribute to your self-identity is how you think, your moral choices and actions. And notice what I'm saying here. It's your choices and actions, not referencing other people and their values and what they're doing with their lives. You have to identify yourself. You have to become an individual. You have to discover what you like and what you want to do without being fearful of being rejected from other groups. You don't have to worry about being an Uncle Tom or a coon or whatever the hell, because your race does not enslave the inner desires of your mind. So, just be an individual, bro.